Hey everyone, it's Kai, and I kind of want to just have a quick discussion on the standard metagame right now. We're basing this off Japan, but this is a lot of relevance for the English format because we will be playing in this set 2 format for quite a long time. In a couple of weeks, Japan will be moving on to set 3, while we have to wait till December. Of course, we get Lyrical coming up, but Lyrical kind of just adds deck. It doesn't really change too much of the existing metagame, right? So I just kind of want to talk about now. Right here, we see that I've like kind of divided archetypes into two groups, right? Two groups, and generally these are kind of like the more meta archetypes. I haven't put everything. Like, there's no point putting in Phantom Blaster Dragon. I guess the most meta stuff we're missing is kind of like a Dragonic Overlord, Hexa Orb, and Zorga. Maybe I should put Zorga, right? Because Zorga is actually very popular in the West. But like, those decks don't really show up as often as maybe some of these decks. And I mean, I'm kind of stretching it here, right? We don't really see much Orphist or Magnolia at all, but I kind of just wanted to make a point, right? Just want to make a point. Now, first off, how have I really divided these decks into? Well, on the left, we have a group of kind of slow decks, slow early game decks that want to play very conservatively, right? Bruce, Final Rush happens at turn 4. Bastion, Alt's cards are grade 3, so can't really do anything. Catgirl and Clarissa, they don't really want to commit cards early. Their entire game plan is just play super lame early on because they already get the power that they normally want. Their Vanguard hits 15k without much issue, and that's a good life, right? That's a good life. Your opponent really can't guard the Vanguard column, and that's good enough. And then Uriel is kind of just limited. The multi-attacks with her are limited behind like a Persona Ride, so you know it doesn't really get its huge turns off until like kind of turn 4. While on the right we have 3 decks that can act pretty quickly. Magnolia, before, at least in set 1, is well known to be a good Bastion counter because, you know, you just throw down a field. What is your opponent going to do? Probably nothing, right? Nothing much they can do. They're just going to eat damage and hope for the best. Orphist, kind of the same game plan. You rush your opponent down and then sit on a bunch of Shadow Army tokens and a hand that can just like guard everything. And then Nirvana's kind of the weird one, right? This Overdress deck can kind of play. It has like a bit of everything. It can do a good early game, do a good push, or otherwise you could just sit around and play a late game with urges and do multi-attacks like that and really pop off. But you know what's interesting now is that a lot of these decks, we don't really see them anymore. You know, right? We don't see them much, right? We saw Nirvana quite a bit during the early, not the early stage, I guess. Kind of a few weeks after the release of set 2, Nirvana came to play, won a few tournaments, people going, wow, this deck is actually pretty good. But now recently it's just totally dropped off, especially when Lyrical has come out. This deck doesn't really, basically all of these decks don't really see much play. And you could say that it's because it has a lot of, these decks kind of had bad matchups, and well, at least Magnolia and Nirvana has some bad matchups, while like Orphist, the ceiling, the dimensions that it has and what it can do is quite low, right? A lot of Overdress decks are focused on kind of doing one thing effectively, right? Bastion, multi-attacks of huge power, right? You know, Bruce, just do everything. Multi-attacks of high power. Catgirl, right? Multi-attacks with a high Vanguard column with Sentinel Stricken Crit. While Orphist has just got this, it's got 3 attacks, nothing really special about that. 3 attacks is a big detriment, I think. And it does twin drive still, so kind of low pressure. It does have high power though, but that's kind of it. That's kind of it. So although if you rush your opponent down early, it's cool. It's kind of hard for your opponent to guard. Once it goes off to a bit of the late game, your grind power is kind of not as good as any other deck in the format right now. So that's the problem. Now you might be thinking we are missing one archetype, and I'll kind of get to that soonish. But yeah, so if we just kind of look at the matchups, ideally these kind of have a good matchup against Bastion, but it's not like Bastion can't deal with these because Bastion's just that good. But then when you look at something like a Bruce, right, if it survives the early game, which it generally can, it's not too hard. If you play Bruce at a higher level, you basically have a decent matchup against a lot of these. Like, okay, sure, like some of these, like Orphist, it can pop some of its cards, so like lenders can't get like the full value and things like that. But you know, like Bruce just hits high power columns. There's nothing much you can say about that. And then basically the rest of these now. Now let's talk about the thing that we're missing here, and that is Seraph Snow, right? You're wondering, where has this gone? Well, Seraph Snow is kind of weird, right? Because it's actually one of the weirder decks out in the format right now. Seraph Snow, it relies on getting prison, putting cards in the prison, getting that triple drive going. It is only a 3-attack deck because, of course, yeah, 3 attacks kind of, it's not great. But it's still got its tricks, right? It's still got its tricks. It's not really an early game deck, although it kind of can, because you can still put cards down and kind of push. At the same time, you have ways to, you have an order that can grab cards out of your opponent's hands and put them in the prison. The prison part of the deck is actually not as hard anymore because of like things like bug motor, and overall just you can play like a grindy game because you've got defensive options and you've got like triple drive, which is a great plus. And then you have decent matchups against several of these clans, right? Against like Rush clans, Magnolia, you win, right? You have no problems. You have no problems beating that. Let me just create something. So you have absolutely no problems beating any of this, to be honest. You might have issues of Orphist because, you know, you get rid of their tokens, but at the same time you could reason that, you know, getting rid of their tokens for a CD1 is not a bad deal, right? It's not a bad deal. And there's like other ways you can generate prison. So yeah, basically you could just say that Seraph Snow is favored against this. Like, this is an arrow, so it beats that. And Seraph Snow generally has like decent matchups against a lot of these clans too, because, you know, they hit turn 4, they start popping off, but at the same time you start generating prison, and you can kind of like half grind out your opponent just based on what you trigger. So it's kind of a 50-50. Now, there is a new card that has really changed all this up, and do you know what it is? I'll give you a hint. It is PR, and we've been seeing it pop up quite a bit. It is Macalite, Accused Macalite. Now, this card is actually pretty insane when you think about it, right? One of Seraph Snow's biggest weaknesses is that, okay, sure, it's got an early game, but it's not that impressive, right? You're putting down a 10k. At best, you're putting down a 15k, which is the old man, but that takes up slots. Or you're playing the order, like the prison world kind of idea, where you're running the Orphist order and getting that 15k Shadow Army token. So that's kind of where your pressure is coming from in the early game, and it's a very one-dimensional kind of card inclusion, right? Those cards don't really become anything else apart from just being beat sticks. And if you put them in, it means you have like less defensive options, because you have to like replace the usually it's the violet, right? The null guard. So yeah, it's kind of like a trade-off. And let's just put it this way: the early game in Vanguard doesn't really last that long. Right, it doesn't really last that long. It's usually the turns after it that last longer. So those are kind of low value inclusions. However, Malachite or Macalite offers 3 roles in the deck, right? And usually what you do replace the Violet for Macalite, but what it does is it gives you a 15k attacker in the early game. Its condition for it is so simple. You just need 2 cards in the prison. So okay, you ride your grade 2, like you ride the grade 2, you get 1 in the prison, and then you play this down, and bam, that's 15k, because you top deck put a card into the prison. That's great, right? So you have a 15k beater. You can play very aggressively with this if you want to. If you fight like a Bastion, a Catgirl, or even Clarissa, right? You go, okay, let me just put this down and bash you, right? Especially if you're first against a Clarissa, because it's going to take them a while for them to get to that, to be brawling, right? To be brawling. Actually, I think you just, even if you're second, you can still do it because you need to be grade 3 for them to start fighting you all for. So you can put these cards down early to push, and then, you know, when the time comes, you can get rid of them. So like basically, like you have 4 decks, which this card is actually great against early on. And this is the reason why a lot of these Bruce decks now are running Edens, because before they could just run 4 Leonards, kind of just go, yeah, what does your opponent do? Is he actually going to rush me? And the answer is yes. Now they can rush you. Now they have to play Edens to actually control the board a bit, and force you to play a bit more honestly. But yeah, the 15k is actually extremely important. Now, the second one is that you also generate 1 prison, and that is just good. Generating prison is great. You can like just what, 1 bug motor, 2 bug motor, play this. You don't even use a CB to get to put 2 from the field. You've generated 3 prison without interacting with your opponent's board as well. And you know, if you're lucky, bam, you get rid of their persona ride, or you get rid of a crit or something like that. It just feels good, right? It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, you feel amazing. But the third option is you have an extreme late game option as well, right? Where when your opponent reaches the end of their deck, you have a mill option as well. If you still have cards like this basically gets rid of 1 card. And because you have great defensive options, you can usually just grind out the game until into a late scenario where that is actually relevant. Or if you're lucky, and of course this happens, you get an over trigger at some point in the damage zone, and their turn gets shut down. That's usually pretty big against like a Bruce deck, or against Clarissa, or against like any of these decks where they want to do these multi-attacks, and that is pretty much all these late game ideas. You take a damage and over trigger, you shut down the whole turn. You've won yourself a whole turn. That means another turn where your guards in your hand are not being impacted, so you can still continue living, right? You can still live, which is great. It's great. So if you live, you reach longer into the game, into a situation when this actually starts mattering pretty heavily. You play like 2 of this down at some point in the game. It's like 2 of their cards. They went from like 6 cards in deck to 4, and they have to think about if they can actually twin drive or not, right? So this card alone solves 3 problems in Seraph Snow. Is actually incredible, and once this card comes out in English, which I hopefully it does, right? Hopefully it does. Let me move this up so you can see this a bit better. Seraph Snow's matchups become just good. You automatically beat these decks that kind of half beat these decks, especially when you think about Orphis, popular in the West. Whatever. Just play. This is going to be way better, right? And then now your matchups against these got better. Not this though, but these got better. That's great. So overall, once this card comes out, I think Seraph Snow will just get a huge bump in terms of popularity and strength. And then it would just be kind of a really popular deck, and kind of a deck to beat in the game, especially with a good player who knows how to, you know, force your opponent to do weird options with, like, you know, the prisons, how they want to, you know, not giving them enough like resources to do things and things like that. So yeah, hopefully this card comes out. They have been saying the PRs, they've been respecting the PRs a bit more, that the West does get them. So hopefully when this comes out, we'll all be chilling, and your prison deck is ready to start winning, right? So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and maybe I'll make a tier list for set, what kind of lyrical monastery set soonish, before you know, before set 3 comes out. And yeah, see you guys in the next video. All right, bye.